Consumed. Westlake Trilogy Book 1 by J.C. Jarrett. Chapter 4. Your mind is as sharp as your blade. Grover cradled his wounded hand against his chest. Taking his uninjured hand away from the wound, he looked down at the small, cleanly cut stubs protruding from his now useless right hand. Taking a dirty handkerchief from his pocket, he wrapped the wound, leaving his thumb and pinky exposed, the only digits he had left on that hand. Tying the cloth tight in an effort to stop the flow of blood from the wound, he felt lightheaded enough from blood loss already. Looking down at the eviscerated remains of his now dead dog, his mind wandered back to the fight with the young Westlake. The boy was more dangerous than the fat man would have believed. Rand had trained his son very well. Clenching his hand in pain, Grover cursed the young warrior for meddling in his affairs. The fat man stood his head, swimming for a few seconds, but soon dissipated. Grover moved about the small clearing, studying the ground. An experienced woodsman and hunter, Grover had a talent for tracking game through the woods, so how much different could a man carrying a woman be, he thought. Inspecting the ground, his trained eye found the pair's trail easily, the tracks being deep due to Peyton carrying the girl away from the clearing. The fat man knelt down, looking in the direction the tracks led deeper into the forest. An evil grin spread across the fat man's face. Boy, you chose the wrong way to run. You just don't know it yet. Peyton never let his eyes leave the goblin as it watched them from the brush. Its greenish-gray skin helped it blend with the foliage as it scratched its short, thin leg with an overly large hand. "Let's get out of here right now," the young warrior said, offering a hand to Elisa to help her to her feet. The injured woman tucked the makeshift crutch under her arm as the pair moved back toward the way Peyton had ran. They had gone no more than 10 feet when several goblins burst from the trees and bushes surrounding them, blocking all avenues of escape. Elisa let out a scream as the goblins, their tusk-like teeth-filled mouths, shouted in a guttural language as they bounced about and threatened the humans with their short spears. Peyton listened to the grunt, clicks, and whistles of the goblin speech while trying to remember all his father had taught him about the creatures. Goblins are not evil creatures like most people believe. Even though they do eat people, it's not different to them than us eating a pig or a cow. They are very territorial and will challenge anybody found in their lands. But if you show yourself to be brave, strong, and give them respect, then they tend to leave you be. The voice of his father rang out in his mind. Peyton pulled Elisa behind him, showing the goblins he meant to protect her. Then, in a flourish, flipped his cloak back, exposing the shining hilts to his straight sabers. The goblins continued to bound and thrust their spears in his direction, all the while still barking in their strange tongue. Peyton looked at the goblins, then began to speak to them in their own language, swordplay not being the only thing his father had taught him. "I am Peyton Westlake, and this is my female, Elisa." The young warrior began to the shock of the goblins at hearing a human speak their own tongue. As he spoke, Peyton pointed to himself, then to Elisa, who stood also in shock of him talking in the strange, guttural language. "We did not mean to cross into your lands," the warrior continued. The goblins still stood in awe of this human speaking in their tongue, even though just barely. The largest of the goblins stepped forward and eyed the two of them with his large yellow orbs. "Why is your woman chained and so badly beaten?" the large goblin asked. "She was taken by an evil man called Grover. This is the man who hurt and chained her." The young warrior replied as he remembered that goblins revere their females, protecting them at all cost. The large goblin, who appeared to be the hunting party's leader, raised his arms, putting his hands wide at it belly. "This Grover is he," the goblin said, still holding its hands wide. Peyton's head nodded in reply to the question. "We know of this human. My people call him Pigman. Several times Pigman and his dogs have attacked and killed my people for no reason. Pigman is no friend to the goblins." The leader spoke while appraising the young warrior. "You and your female bring us a problem, Peyton Westlake. The problem of what we are to do with you." The goblin leader started. You have showed us great respect and no sign of hostility. I would just let you go, but then that would put Grubnek. The leader pointed to himself, then continued, in a problem with the chief. So I ask you and your female to come with us, the goblin leader said to the surprised human. Peyton nodded to Grubnek, then turned to Elisa, who stood more confused than anything. After several seconds of explaining, fear began to show in her emerald eyes. She reached out and took his hand in hers. She trusted the young warrior completely and was willing to stand by him. So, as one, the pair turned and followed the goblins deeper into the woods. The noonday sun began to ride high in the sky after several hours of following the goblins. Peyton once again carried the poor girl. Elisa's skin was pale and she was having trouble keeping her eyes open. Several times Peyton looked down to find her head on his chest, sound asleep. The worried lines etched across the young warrior's face did not go unnoticed by the goblin leader Grubnek. He too saw the female's condition, but he knew it was up to the chief if they were to be released or be for dinner. Grubnek liked the young human and hoped the chief saw that he was different from the rest of the humans that stomped through their woods. Soon the smell of pork roasting drifted in on the breeze, telling Peyton that they were very near the goblin village. Peyton looked down at the sleeping girl in his arms. Elisa, he said until one of her eyes opened to look back at him, barely raising her head. Peyton was all she got out before unconsciousness took her again. Peyton called her name again and again, gently shaking the girl, but she showed no sign of hearing him. She still breathed, was his only thought as the goblins lead them into the village. Peyton felt uneasy with hundreds of large yellow eyes staring at the humans being paraded through the village. The village was made up mostly of tanned hide-covered structures, a large fire pit set in the middle of the village with a huge boar on a spit roasting over the flames. Thank the gods that they had dinner prepared already, or they may have been the main course, he thought. Stopping in front of the largest structure in the village, they waited with the whole of the village surrounding them, waiting to see what was going to happen. Peyton's arms burned with the effort to hold Elisa, but he could not bring himself to set the girl down in her condition. After several minutes, the flap to the dwelling opened, releasing 10 spear-armed goblins, all wearing a red line of war paint across their eyes. They lined up 5 on each side of the door. Then a goblin exited the flap that at first glance Peyton would not have thought it a goblin. Nearly the young warrior's height, with arms twice as long and corded with strips of muscle and a silver human-crafted hilted longsword on its hip, it had to be the biggest goblin that any had ever seen. Peyton was sure that this was the chief and was waiting for it to address them when the huge goblin reached over and opened the flap again, letting a single goblin out. The sharp contrast between the 2 goblins that stood at the dwelling hide flap door was amazing. If the first was the biggest, then this was defiantly the oldest. The ancient goblin's skin was nearly snow white from age, and both its huge eyes were gray instead of the bright yellow, like his kin. Skin and flesh hung limply from its old bones, as if something was trying to pull just his flesh to the ground. When it opened its mouth to speak, Peyton saw that there wasn't a single tooth in its mouth. Grubnek, why have you brought these humans before me? I have told you to leave the humans alone unless they enter our land or attack us. The chief spoke, his voice wispy. Grubnek looked around at his men, then up at the young warrior before he began to speak. Chief Garak, the Old One, these humans were caught on our lands, but they ran there from a common enemy, the Pigman. They showed us great respect and not a hint of malice. The male even speaks our tongue, though not well. The Pigman is the one responsible for the injuries of the female, causing her to be unable to move or speak. I ask you to please allow us to help the female, then give them safe passage through our lands in view of our common foe. When he finished, the crowd of goblins about began to chatter in their guttural tongue faster than Peyton could keep up. He looked at Grubnek, then spoke. Thank you for the kind words, Hunt Leader Grubnek. A human could not have asked for more. I know that our people do not see eye to eye, but though I have just met you, I would like to call you friend. The young warrior had more to say, but was cut off by the chieftain. Young human, How is it you know our language? It is not a common thing for a human to know. Peyton, fighting the urge to lay the girl upon the grass, spoke. My father taught me the tongue when I was younger. He told me that one day I may be in need of it. The chief stepped toward the young warrior, stopping within arm's reach of him, and raised its wooden chest piece to show 4 large, long scars across its chest. Many cycles ago, when I was just a young hunter, I stumbled upon a huge, angry grizzly bear. I tried to fight it off and get away, but I was no match for the enraged animal. I did not know at the time that it had cubs nearby and saw me as a threat to them. The bear gave me this wound, and I would have died if it was not for a human that came from the wood with a huge sword and fought the beast off, driving it and its cubs into the deeper forest. Peyton listened intently to the story, even though he stood there, his legs and knees aching from the long walk carrying the unconscious young woman. His arms burning from the strain, and he could feel blood caking in his shirt sleeve from the wound in his forearm, feeling he knew where the story was going. So the human took me to his small camp, and for nearly a week nursed my wound. Slowly we began to understand each other, and I taught him our tongue the best I could. I call the human friend to this day, and would give my own life for him or his kin for the kindness he showed me. So, human, what is your father's name? The chieftain finished, his gray eyes searching Peyton ice-blue orbs. My father's name is Rand. Rand Westlake, the warrior said. Rand Westlake paced back and forth, his mind raced with worry for his son. It wasn't that far to Grover's through the woods, the way he knew Peyton would go. The sun had rolled well past noon in the sky, and not a sign of him. He wanted so badly to get on his horse and ride out to the Grover farm and confront the fat man with the whereabouts of his son. But he had promised himself that this was Peyton's choice, and he had to learn that his father would not always be there to help him. The sound of a wagon outside pulled Rand from his thoughts. Leaping to the door, he threw it open, expecting to see his son, but instead was graced with the sight of the huge bulk of Grover bouncing in the seat of his wagon. Rand's heart skipped a beat. All he could think about was Peyton's lifeless body bouncing in the back of that rickety wagon. The wagon stopped not far from the house as the worried father moved toward it. "Where is your son, Westlake?" the fat man yelled. A sudden elation fell over him as Rand heard these words. His son was alive, and from the look of Grover holding his own. The fat man was a sight to behold, his face badly bruised, and rivulets of dried blood ran down both sides of his nose. The side of his head sported a tremendously swollen knot, and then his gaze fell upon the crudely bandaged hand with just the pinky finger and thumb sticking out. Blood had soaked through the rag, and Rand could tell that there were no fingers under it. "Rough morning?" Rand said, just a little amused looking at the man. "I said, where is your son?" the fat man yelled at Rand after climbing off his wagon. Rand's amusement was quickly replaced with anger as he moved toward Grover. "He is not here, and even if he was, I would not tell you. So now, Grover, get your blubber back on your wagon before you regret ever coming here in the first place," the warrior said in the same cold, calm voice from the day before. Ripping the makeshift bandage from his ruined hand, he shoved it up in front of the older man's face. "Look at what your son has done to me, and on top of this, he stole away my girl too," the fat man screamed. Rand looked at the hand, and a small smile curled the corners of his mouth. "I'd say you should just consider yourself lucky he didn't kill you. Keep talking the way you have been, and you won't be so lucky with me." The cold tone gone from Rand's voice. Now just pure venom dripped from his words. "Well then, Westlake, you will just love to hear what I'm going to do to your son when I catch him." The fat man started, but never got the rest past his lips. Rand's fist shot out, connecting solidly with the fat man's jaw, whipping his head around, causing darkness to close in on the edge of his vision. Fighting to stay conscious, Grover found himself sprawled on the hard ground. With explosive force, the air in the fat man's lungs flew from his lips as Rand's knee landed heavily on his massive chest. Gasping for air, he heard the enraged warrior shout, "You will never touch my son," just before the second blow connected with his face. The next several seconds was like a nightmare for the fat man as his head bounced off the hard ground from the repeated strikes of Rand's large fists. Over and over, the man punched out his knuckles, tearing open from the brutal impacts. Blood splashed from Grover's battered face, covering Rand in drops of red gore. The enraged warrior let loose one final powerful blow into the left eye of the battered fat man, causing him to release a scream of pain just before the darkness enveloped him. Peyton watched intently as the goblin shaman continued to chant, shaking the rattlesnake tail over the still unconscious form of Elisa. The young warrior kept on his guard. Even though the chief had made them honorary members of the tribe and declared them true friends to the goblins, he still did not completely trust them. The chain hanging from the tortured girl's leg began to rise from the floor as if alive. Slowly, it coiled in midair until all of the chain hangs suspended. The chanting increased as the steel anklet wrapped around Elisa's badly burnt leg began to glow a soft blue light. To Peyton's amazement, the steel began to twitch, then unravel from the wound, tearing bits of skin and flesh off with it. The young warrior quietly thanked the gods that she still lay unconscious while the shaman weaved his spells. The pain would have been unbearable. Once the steel was flat again, the goblin reached out, taking it from the air, and laid it off on a small table cluttered with jars and potions. The first look at the flesh under the steel brought revulsion and a bit of bile into the young man's throat. Skin completely burnt away, revealing the bare blackened muscle. Peyton's anger boiled to the surface, and he hoped that he had the chance to confront Grover again and return the pain onto him for his crimes against this beautiful woman. Several damp cloth salves were laid by the shaman across the vicious wound, and the chanting and rattle began again. Nearly a half hour passed, and suddenly the chanting was gone, casting an eerie silence over Shaman's hut. Peyton looked up, pulling himself from his thoughts to see shining emerald eyes staring back at him. Elisa was in a bit of a panic when she came to, her surroundings very foreign and a small goblin tending to her wounds. Then her eyes fell upon Peyton standing near the hide flap to this strange hut covered in small hanging bones, dead things in bottles and potions. Elisa's feeling of panic faded the instant that their eyes met, being replaced with a calm elation. Small goblin hands gently removed the salves from her leg, revealing clean, whole skin, though there were still a few scars of her torment left as a reminder of her awful ordeal. Standing from the small cot, a wide grin broke across the woman's face, bringing a light to her eyes. "There's no pain," she exclaimed excitedly, then bent down and hugged the little goblin shaman, whose gray-green skin blushed a little scarlet. Seeing her stand and even smile caused Peyton's heart to flutter with feelings he could not explain. The beauty released the goblin, then ran, throwing herself into the arms of the young warrior. They held each other close for a long moment, both seeming to lose track of time. Finally, the young warrior whispered softly in her ear, "You scared the hell out of me when I could not get you to wake." Pulling her head back, she looked deeply into his eyes that were rimmed with tears of joy. Peyton had more to say, but the way she looked at him caused his thoughts to escape him. Oh, forget it," he finally said. Pulling her close, their lips met in a passionate kiss that she returned to him tenfold.